I didn't believe in possessive men until one claimed me in front of 300 people, and I let him. The Monterey Grand wasn't my world. It was a place where chandeliers cost more than my yearly rent, where women wore dresses I could only photograph, never touch. I was there to work, just the assistant, invisible behind my camera, capturing other people's perfect moments while my own life remained carefully out of focus. That's how I preferred it. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant no one asked questions about the girl who'd changed her name, her hair color, her entire existence 3 years ago. But Marcus found me anyway. You will feel so many emotions in this mysterious love story I'm about to tell. Please support us by clicking subscribe to the channel. I'd been doing so well. 8 months since I'd blocked his number, 6 months since I'd stopped checking over my shoulder, 3 months since I'd finally convinced myself that the past was actually past. Then his hand was on my wrist. Too tight, always too tight, and his breath was sharp with expensive scotch and cheaper accusations. You think you can just ignore me, Ava? The champagne fountain bubbled beside us, golden and oblivious. The string quartet played something by Vivaldi. Women in silk laughed behind their hands. No one was looking at us. No one ever looked when you needed them to. Marcus, please. Not here. Where then? You won't answer my calls? You blocked me on everything. What was I supposed to do? Leave me alone, I thought. But I'd learned that saying it only made men like Marcus angrier, so I said nothing. I tried to pull away. His grip tightened. My camera hung heavy around my neck, useless as armor. That's when the crowd parted. I noticed him the way you notice a storm front. Sudden awareness that the air pressure has changed, that something fundamental has shifted in the atmosphere. Vincent Castellano moved through the ballroom like water finding its path, inevitable and unhurried. I'd photographed him earlier, noting the way people leaned away when he passed, the way conversations died and restarted in his wake. He was the kind of handsome that made you forget to breathe. Dark suit tailored to a body that clearly knew its own power. Dark eyes that missed nothing. A face that belonged on Renaissance paintings of beautiful, damned angels. He stopped in front of us. Marcus's hand loosened on my wrist. Just slightly. Just enough for me to feel the blood return to my fingers. Vincent didn't look at Marcus. He looked at me. Really looked. The way my camera looks. Seeing past the surface to whatever truth hides underneath. His eyes were dark brown, almost black in the chandelier light. And they cataloged everything. My too quick breathing. My trapped wrist. The way I'd made myself smaller without realizing it. Dance with me. It wasn't a question. His voice was low, rough-edged, absolute. The kind of voice that didn't expect to be refused. I'm sorry. Do I know you? Marcus trying to sound confident, failing. Vincent still didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on mine, and in them I saw something that made my breath catch. Not threat exactly, but promise. The promise of what I couldn't name. Dance with me, he repeated, extending his hand. He'll see you're already mine. The string quartet stopped. I swear to God. The whole ballroom went silent. 300 people in designer clothes holding designer drinks, and every single one of them turned to watch. The conductor's baton froze mid-air. A woman's laugh died in her throat. Even the champagne fountain seemed to pause its golden cascade. Marcus's hand fell away from my wrist. I should have said no. I should have laughed it off, made some joke about mistaken identity, retreated to the safety of my camera and my careful invisibility. But I was so tired. Tired of making myself small, of running from ghosts, of spending my life behind a lens instead of inside it. And something about the way Vincent looked at me, not at my body, not with that hungry male assessment I'd learned to recognize and avoid, but at me, as if he could see through all my careful construction to the girl I used to be, the one who'd believed in things like rescue and romance and men who meant what they said. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, firm, warm, absolutely certain. The music started again, but different now, slower, just for us. He led me onto the dance floor and the crowd parted like he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. His hand found the small of my back, pulled me closer than was strictly proper, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. Close enough that I could feel the solid warmth of him, the barely contained power in his frame. We moved. and I'd forgotten I knew how to dance. My body remembered what my mind had tried to erase, the lessons my mother insisted on when I was 12. Back when we still believed I'd grow up to be someone who attended galas instead of photographing them. "You're trembling," he said, his mouth close to my ear. "You just claimed me in front of everyone I work for." I think trembling is appropriate. The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, something more dangerous. "Would you prefer I'd let him keep hurting you?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was complicated and humiliating. Yes. Maybe. Because at least that hurt was familiar. We turned Awir, and I caught sight of Marcus at the edge of the dance floor. His face was red, twisted with an emotion I couldn't name. Rage or embarrassment or both. He looked like he wanted to interrupt, to drag me away, to reassert whatever claim he thought he had. But he didn't. He just stood there, impotent and furious, while Vincent Castellano, a man whose name I'd only heard whispered, always with a mixture of respect and fear, danced with me like I was something precious he'd decided to keep. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Vincent." He said it simply, as if the single name explained everything. Maybe it did. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I don't like men who hurt women. And because you looked like you needed someone to see you." See me. The words lodged in my chest, sharp and strange. I'd spent 3 years trying not to be seen. The song ended. Vincent didn't let go immediately. His hand stayed at my back, his fingers still laced with mine, and he leaned close enough that only I could hear. "From now on, no one touches you." It should have sounded possessive, controlling, like every red flag I'd learned to recognize. But somehow it didn't. Somehow it sounded like the first honest promise anyone had made me in years. He released me then, stepped back, gave a slight nod that might have been a bow. The crowd applauded, for the dance, for the show, for the drama they'd just witnessed. Vincent disappeared into the crowd as smoothly as he'd appeared, and I was left standing alone in the center of the dance floor, my hand still warm from his touch, my body still humming with the memory of being that close to something dangerous. I didn't know whether I'd just been saved or claimed or both, but I knew, standing there with everyone watching and my carefully invisible life suddenly spotlit, that something had begun, something beyond my control, beyond my careful plans, beyond every wall I'd built to keep myself safe. And God help me. I couldn't tell if I was terrified or relieved. I thought the gala was a one-time intervention, a moment of chivalry from a man who collected dramatic gestures the way some people collected art. By morning, I'd convinced myself it meant nothing, that Vincent Castellano had already forgotten the photographer's assistant he'd rescued from an awkward confrontation. I was wrong. The town car appeared outside my apartment at 7:15, idling at the curb like it had always been there, like it belonged to the landscape of my ordinary life. Black, expensive, too clean for the streets of my neighborhood where garbage trucks rattled past at dawn and the bodega owner hosed down the sidewalk every morning. I stood at my window with my coffee, still wearing yesterday's makeup because I'd been too exhausted to wash my face, and stared at the car, stared at the driver who stood beside it. Older man, gray suit, the kind of patient stillness that suggested military training or something darker. My phone rang. Unknown number. "There's a car outside my apartment." "Good morning to you too." Vincent's voice, rough with sleep or cigarettes or both. He sounded amused. "Did you send it? You have to get to work. The subway is unreliable. The subway is fine. I've been taking it for 3 years. Humor me. I should have refused. Should have asserted my independence, drawn a line, made it clear that one dance didn't give him the right to rearrange my transportation. But I was already late, and the truth was the subway was unreliable. And something about his voice, that rough-edged certainty, made refusal feel exhausting. Fine, just for today. Of course, just for today. He hung up before I could change my mind. The driver's name was Thomas. He opened the door without speaking, drove me to the studio in downtown Manhattan where I assisted a wedding photographer named Claire, who paid me barely enough to cover rent, and didn't care that I'd shown up in a town car that cost more than her annual equipment budget. "Hot date?" she asked, watching through the window as Thomas drove away. Something like that. I tried to lose myself in work, adjusting lights, organizing lenses, editing photos of couples who believed in happily ever after. But my mind kept drifting back to the dance floor, to Vincent's hand at my back, to the way Marcus had looked at me afterward, not angry anymore, but afraid. At lunch, the delivery guy brought my usual order from the Thai place 2 blocks over, except I hadn't ordered anything. Attached to the bag was a note on heavy cardstock, the kind of paper that cost more per sheet than I spent on groceries. Drink something stronger than fear. The inside wasn't Thai food. Inside was soup from a French restaurant I'd never been to, the kind of place with a 6-month waiting list and a dress code. Butternut squash with truffle oil. It tasted like money and attention, like someone had noticed I existed. Claire raised her eyebrows but didn't ask. I texted the unknown number. "You can't just send me things." His response came immediately. "Watch me." By evening, I'd counted 4 different men in dark suits positioned around my neighborhood. One reading a newspaper outside the bodega, same page for 40 minutes. One checking his phone across from my apartment building, never actually looking at the screen. 2 more at either end of my block, pretending to exist, failing at invisibility the way only professionals fail. I called Vincent. He answered on the first ring. "I didn't ask for bodyguards." "You didn't have to." "This is insane. I'm nobody. I'm not important enough to need protection." Silence on the other end, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, "Come to dinner." "What?" "Tomorrow night. I'll explain everything, but not over the phone." "Vincent, please." The word startled me. Men like him didn't say please. They commanded, demanded, expected obedience. But there it was, rough and honest. The first crack in his armor. "Okay. Tomorrow." I hung up before he could hear the uncertainty in my voice. That night, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that the men in suits were coincidence, that the car and the soup and the note were just Vincent's way of showing interest. Excessive, maybe, but not sinister. Rich people did things differently. Maybe this was normal in his world? Then I found the photograph. It was slipped under my door sometime after midnight. I only saw it because I got up for water, because my apartment was too hot and my mind too restless. White envelope, no markings. Inside, a photograph of me leaving my building that morning, taken from across the street with a long lens. Professional quality. The kind of shot I might have taken myself. Someone had drawn a red circle around my face. My hands shook as I turned it over. On the back, in handwriting that was trying too hard to be neat. "You look better through a lens, don't you think?" I called Vincent, 2 in the morning, and I called him without thinking, without questioning whether he'd answer, whether I had that right. He answered before the second ring. "Ava?" Someone was outside my apartment. Someone took my picture. "I'm sending Thomas. Pack a bag. Enough for a few days." "What?" "No, I just need you to pack a bag." His voice changed, went flat and hard. "This is not a request. You can't just order me around because..." "Ava, please, I can explain, but not like this. Not when you're exposed." "Exposed?" The word settled in my chest like ice. "I'm calling the police." "The police can't help you. Not with this. Please. Trust me, I shouldn't have..." Every instinct I'd developed over 3 years of hiding screamed at me to hang up, to run, to disappear again into whatever anonymous city would have me. But something in his voice, not the command, but the fear underneath it, made me hesitate. Why is this happening? Pack your bag. I'll explain everything. I promise. He hung up. I stood in my apartment, my careful, anonymous apartment with its thrift store furniture and blank walls, and tried to remember how to breathe. The photograph lay on my kitchen counter, that red circle like a target, like a promise. Thomas arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't knock, just waited in the hallway outside my door until I opened it. "Mr. Castellano asked me to escort you." "I can take care of myself." "I'm sure you can, miss." But humor an old man. Something about his face, weathered, kind, professionally blank, made me relent. I grabbed the bag I'd packed with shaking hands, threw in my laptop, my camera, enough clothes for 3 days, even though I couldn't imagine staying that long. The drive to Vincent's estate took 40 minutes. Out of the city, through suburbs that got progressively wealthier, past gates that got progressively taller. Thomas didn't speak. I didn't ask questions. I watched streetlights blur past and tried not to think about all the ways this could be a mistake. The Castellano estate existed behind walls and silence. We passed through gates that didn't appear on any map. I'd checked on my phone, zooming in on the address Thomas had programmed into the GPS. According to Google, this was just empty space, a blank spot between labeled roads. But here were gardens too perfect to be real. Here were fountains lit from below. Here was a house that looked like it had been stolen from a European postcard and transplanted to American soil. Vincent waited at the door. He'd changed from whatever he'd been wearing. Now just dark jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Tattoos on his forearms, dark ink I couldn't quite make out in the low light. He looked tired, human, more real than he had at the gala. "Thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? Something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or recognition. Yes, you always have a choice. He showed me inside. The house was exactly what I'd expected and nothing like it. Beautiful in that cold, museum way that suggested professional decorators and unlimited budgets. But also lived in. Books on tables, coffee cups on counters, a jacket thrown over a chair. Evidence of a man who actually existed here, not just a showpiece. The West Wing is yours. He led me through hallways that seemed to multiply, rooms that opened into more rooms. No one enters without permission. Not even me. This feels like a prison. It's protection. What's the difference? He stopped walking, turned to face me in a hallway lined with paintings I probably should have recognized. His eyes were darker than I remembered, exhausted in a way that suggested he hadn't slept either. The difference is that you can leave whenever you want. But I'd prefer you stayed alive to make that choice. You still haven't explained what's happening. Why someone took my picture. Why you've had men following me. Why any of this matters. Tomorrow, I promise. But tonight, you're safe. That's what matters. He showed me to a suite of rooms that was bigger than my entire apartment. King bed with white linens, bathroom with marble counters, windows that overlooked gardens I couldn't quite see in the darkness. It should have felt like luxury. Instead, it felt like a beautiful cage I'd locked myself inside. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. Thomas can show you around in the morning. And Ava? He paused at the door. I'm glad you called me. Then he was gone, and I was alone in this strange, perfect room, still holding the photograph with its red circle, still trying to understand how my careful, invisible life had unraveled in less than 24 hours. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window and watched the gardens emerge in pre-dawn light and tried to convince myself I'd made the right choice. My phone buzzed just after 6. Unknown number. Not Vincent's. The message was simple. You were chosen as a message. He'll destroy everything he touches, including you. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Outside, the sun rose over Vincent Castellano's empire, beautiful and terrible, and I understood with sudden clarity that I'd walked into something much bigger than a photograph, much darker than a jealous ex-boyfriend. I'd walked into a war, and somehow, without meaning to, I'd become the weapon they were using to fight it. Vincent's estate felt different in daylight, less like a sanctuary, more like evidence of everything I didn't understand about the man who owned it. I found him in what he called the breakfast room, though it was larger than most restaurants. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that seemed to go on forever, each section more elaborate than the last. He sat at a table made of dark wood that looked like it had survived a few centuries, drinking coffee and reading something on his phone. Still in jeans, still human-looking, still dangerous in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. He looked up when I entered. His eyes tracked to the phone clutched in my hand, the one with the threatening message I hadn't been able to stop reading all night. You got another one? Not a question. He already knew. How did you? Because they want me to know. They want me to see you scared. Sit down, please. I sat. Thomas appeared with coffee I hadn't asked for, the kind that probably cost more per pound than I made in a week. It tasted like everything I'd been missing. Rich, complex, unapologetic. Vincent set down his phone, looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away, made me force myself not to. 5 years ago, did you testify against a man named Daniel Rourke? The name hit me like a fist. I'd spent 3 years trying not to think it, not to let it shape my mouth, not to let it have power. But here it was, spoken casually over breakfast in a stranger's house. How do you know that name? Answer the question. Yes, I testified. They told me I'd be safe if I cooperated, that he'd never find me. They lied. Vincent's voice was flat, factual, not cruel, just honest in a way that made it worse. Daniel Rourke didn't disappear. He went underground, built new networks, and now he's working with people who want to hurt me. I don't understand. I'm nobody. Why would anyone use me to... Because 3 nights ago, I danced with you in front of 300 witnesses. Because I sent a car for you. Because I'm sitting here having breakfast with you instead of letting you disappear back into whatever careful life you'd constructed. He leaned forward, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Not quite fear, but its more sophisticated cousin. They think you matter to me, which means you're leverage. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. So this is my fault. If I hadn't taken your hand, if you hadn't taken my hand, Marcus would still be hurting you, and eventually, he would have done worse. Don't mistake cause and effect, Ava. You didn't create this situation. You just revealed it. What does that mean? It means Marcus isn't your ex-boyfriend having trouble letting go. He's Daniel's plant, has been from the beginning. They've been watching you for months, waiting for an opportunity. The breakfast room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to find something solid in a world that kept shifting. You're lying. I wish I was... He slid his phone across the table. On the screen, surveillance footage, grainy but clear enough. Marcus meeting with a man I recognized from nightmares and federal testimony. Daniel, older now, harder, but unmistakably him. The timestamp was from 6 months ago, before Marcus had coincidentally shown up at the coffee shop where I worked. Before the whirlwind 3 months of dating that had ended with his increasing possessiveness, his demands for access to my apartment, my computer, my carefully guarded life. He was gathering information, Vincent said quietly, learning your patterns, your vulnerabilities, your triggers. They were building a profile. For what? For this? For the moment when someone like me noticed you. Because men like me, Ava, were predictable in certain ways. We see a woman being hurt. We intervene. It's ego. It's control. It's a dozen things therapists would have a field day with. But it's also reliable. So you're saying you were manipulated too. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in that careful control. I'm saying they gave me an excuse to do what I wanted to do anyway. The honesty of it stunned me silent. He stood, moved to the windows. His reflection ghosted over the gardens, making him look like he existed in 2 worlds at once. I need you to understand what protection means in my world. It's not romantic. It's not clean. It means I know things about you that you didn't tell me. Your real name before you changed it. Where you worked before you moved to New York. The apartment in Brooklyn you abandoned in the middle of the night 3 years ago. It means I've had people watching you since the gala, not because I'm obsessed, but because I needed to know if what I suspected was true, which was that you were bait, and that I was stupid enough to take it. I should have been angry, should have felt violated by the invasion of privacy, the surveillance, the presumption, but all I felt was tired, bone deep exhausted by the effort of hiding, of running, of trying to be invisible in a world that kept insisting on seeing me. What happens now? Now, I handle it. You stay here where it's secure. I have a meeting tonight, one that Daniel's partners won't be expecting. After that, you'll be safe. And if you're wrong, he turned from the window. The morning light behind him made it hard to see his face, turned him into a silhouette, a shadow that spoke. I'm not wrong, but if I am, Thomas and my head of security will get you somewhere Daniel can't reach. New identity, new city, new life. Again, I'm tired of new lives. I know. The way he said it, not sympathetic, just acknowledging, made something in my chest crack open. Because he did know. Somehow this man, this stranger who'd claimed me on a dance floor and pulled me into his dangerous world, understood what it cost to keep reinventing yourself, to keep cutting away pieces until you weren't sure what was left. I don't want to hide anymore. Then don't. Stay here. Let me do what I do. And after, he didn't finish. Maybe because he didn't know how to. Or maybe because we both understood that after was a luxury people like us didn't get to count on. The meeting happened after dark. Vincent told me to stay in the West Wing, to let Thomas know if I needed anything, to trust that he knew what he was doing. I tried. I read a book I couldn't focus on, took a bath in a tub that could have fit 3 people, wore clothes from the closet in my room, expensive things with tags still attached, all in my size, like Vincent had known I'd need them, like he'd been planning this. But around midnight, restless and too wired to sleep, I did what I'd always done when the world felt too close. I grabbed my camera and went exploring. The house revealed itself in pieces. Library with leather-bound books that looked read, not decorative. Music room with a piano that had sheet music stacked on top. Chopin, Debussy, someone who understood sadness. Kitchen industrial enough for a restaurant, but with evidence of actual cooking. Spices in mismatched jars, a coffee maker that had seen real use, a photo on the refrigerator of Vincent and an older woman with his eyes. I was photographing the way moonlight fell through a window when I heard the cars. Multiple engines, moving fast, doors slamming. Voices raised in a language I didn't speak but understood in my bones. Anger, urgency, violence barely controlled. I moved to a window overlooking the front drive. 3 black SUVs, men emerging with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested military training or worse, but not attacking, waiting, and then Vincent's car, pulling up to the chaos like he'd expected it. He got out slowly, spoke to the men in that language I didn't understand. His body language was different, looser, more dangerous, like he'd taken off a costume I hadn't realized he was wearing. One of the men shoved someone forward, a figure bound and hooded, stumbling. Vincent yanked the hood off, Daniel. Even from 3 stories up, even in the inadequate lighting, I recognized him. The man who'd loved me, then framed me, then disappeared and left me to clean up the wreckage of my life. He looked older, thinner, terrified in a way I'd never seen him. Vincent spoke to him. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Daniel's face, the way fear transformed into something else. Recognition, understanding. The moment he realized exactly how badly he'd miscalculated. Vincent pulled out his phone, showed Daniel something on the screen. Whatever it was made Daniel's knees buckle. 2 of Vincent's men caught him, held him upright. That's when I saw it. Another car, pulling up fast. Police lights, but wrong somehow. Too few cars for a raid, too casual for an arrest. 2 men in suits got out, detectives, maybe, or federal agents. They spoke to Vincent like they knew him, like this was routine. Money changed hands, not even subtle about it. An envelope passed from Vincent's second-in-command to one of the agents. Evidence of corruption so blatant it took my breath away. Then they took Daniel, put him in their unmarked car and drove away into the night. And I understood with terrible clarity what protection looked like in Vincent's world. Not rescue, transaction, not justice, power. I stepped back from the window, my camera hanging heavy around my neck, and tried to reconcile the man who'd held me gently on a dance floor with the one who'd just bought law enforcement like they were groceries. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but not the threatening one from this morning, a different unknown, which somehow felt worse. The message was an image, a photograph of me, taken tonight, standing at the window with my camera, taken from somewhere in the gardens, somewhere close, below the image. He can't watch you every second, and we're very patient. I looked out the window again. The SUVs were gone. Vincent was gone. The drive was empty except for shadows and the evidence of everything I'd just witnessed. My hands shook as I tried to zoom in on the photo, to figure out where it had been taken from, what angle, how close they'd been. But all I could see was my own face, pale in the window glass, eyes wide, already starting to understand that safety was an illusion and protection was just another word for control. Somewhere in the house, a door opened. Footsteps echoed up the stairs. I turned off my phone's location services 3 years too late and wondered if trust was something you chose or something that was taken from you, piece by piece, until you couldn't remember what it felt like to believe in anything. Vincent appeared in the doorway, still in the same clothes but somehow transformed, blood on his knuckles he hadn't bothered to wash off, expression empty in a way that was worse than anger. You were supposed to stay in your wing. I'm not very good at following orders. He crossed to me, took the phone from my hands before I could hide it, read the message. Something moved behind his eyes, calculation, rage, the cold mathematics of violence. They were in the gardens. I know. While you were out there, I know. He handed back my phone, looked at the camera around my neck like he was seeing it for the first time. "What did you photograph tonight?" The question hung between us. I could lie, could say nothing, could delete the images, could pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen, but something about the blood on his knuckles and the exhaustion in his voice made me tell the truth. Everything. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected it, like he'd known all along that I was the kind of person who documented, who captured, who kept evidence. "Then you know what I am. I'm starting to, and you're still here." It wasn't quite a question, but I answered it anyway. Where else would I go? The honesty of it, the bitter, terrible honesty, made him close his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. Some distance had collapsed between us, or maybe it was just that we'd both stopped pretending. "Show me." What? "The photographs. Show me what you saw." I should have protected him from himself, or protected myself from whatever would happen when he saw his own darkness reflected back. But I was tired of protecting, tired of hiding, tired of making myself small. I handed him the camera. He scrolled through the images in silence. The confrontation, the bound figure, the money-changing hands, his own face, caught in profile, expression hard as a sculpture and just as cold. When he finished, he handed back the camera. "You should go. Tomorrow. Thomas will arrange everything. New identity, new city. Money enough to start over properly this time." I don't want to start over, Ava. I want the truth, all of it. Who Daniel is working for, why they want to hurt you, what that photo means. I want to stop running. The truth will make you complicit. I'm already complicit. I'm standing in your house, eating your food, accepting your protection. The only difference is whether I do it blind or with my eyes open. He studied me for a long moment. Outside, security lights swept the gardens in patterns I was starting to recognize. Somewhere distant, a dog barked. The ordinary sounds of a night that was anything but. "Tomorrow," he said finally. "Tomorrow I'll tell you everything. But tonight, I need you to trust that the men I stationed outside your window will keep you safer than my honesty could." He left before I could argue. I stood alone in the hallway with my camera full of evidence and my phone full of threats, and understood that I'd crossed some invisible line. That there was a version of me from 3 days ago who would have packed her bag and disappeared into the anonymous American night. But that girl was gone. This one. The one who'd taken Vincent's hand, who'd called him at 2 a.m., who'd photographed his darkness and didn't look away. She was something new. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Something that might get me killed. I went back to my room, downloaded the photos to my laptop, backed them up 3 different ways because I'd learned, once upon a time, that evidence was currency and insurance was survival. My phone buzzed again. Vincent this time, his number finally saved. "The men in the gardens are ours now. Sleep. I promise you'll wake up." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe promises meant something in this world of transactions and corruption and violence dressed up as protection, but I'd believed before, and it had cost me everything. So instead, I put a chair against my door, kept my camera close, and watched the gardens through my window until dawn turned the shadows into something less threatening. Until I could almost convince myself that morning meant safety. Until Vincent's head of security knocked on my door with coffee and a message that changed everything. "Ms. Reeves, Mr. Castellano asked me to give you this. It's your original file, from your testimony 5 years ago." He handed me a folder thick with documents I'd never been allowed to read. Documents that held every detail the FBI had collected about Daniel Rourke's operation, my involvement, the evidence that had sent him underground. I opened it, and there, in the first pages, was a name I recognized, Marcus Chen, listed as an informant. Not Daniel's partner, mine. My hands went numb. The file slipped, pages scattering across the perfect hardwood floor of my beautiful prison, because I'd gotten it wrong. Vincent had gotten it wrong. Marcus wasn't working for Daniel. He'd been working with the FBI all along, which meant everything. The gala, the confrontation, Vincent's intervention had been theater. A setup within a setup, wheels within wheels. And somewhere in the center of it all was me, the weapon they were using to destroy each other. I looked up at the head of security, still standing in my doorway with professional patience. "Does Vincent know?" His expression told me everything. "He's about to Vincent found me on the floor of my room, surrounded by scattered pages of my own history, trying to piece together a conspiracy that kept shifting shape every time I thought I understood it. He didn't knock, just appeared in the doorway, and I wondered distantly if I'd ever get used to the way he moved. Silent, inevitable, like gravity had different rules for him. You read it. His voice was carefully neutral. The kind of neutral that takes effort. Marcus was an informant. I looked up at him, still kneeling among the evidence of my own naivete. He was working with the FBI, which means when you intervened at the gala, you weren't saving me from my ex-boyfriend. You were interrupting a federal operation. I know. You know. I stood, pages still clutched in my fists. You knew and you didn't tell me. I found out 2 hours ago. Same file, different source. He stepped into the room, and I saw the exhaustion in him now. Not just physical tiredness, but something deeper. The weariness of a man who'd been playing chess with missing pieces. Agent Marcus Chen has been embedded in Daniel's network for 18 months. His assignment was to get close to you, use you to draw out Daniel's partners, and document everything for prosecution. So the gala was supposed to be the night he made contact with Daniel's supplier. You were his cover. The jealous ex routine was designed to make him sympathetic, vulnerable, easy to approach. The room tilted again. I sat on the edge of the bed because my legs had stopped reliably holding me up. But you ruined it. I ruined it. Vincent moved to the window. That same position from breakfast, backlit and impossible to read. Except I didn't know I was ruining it. I saw a woman being hurt and I intervened. By the time my people identified Marcus as federal, the operation was already compromised. Why didn't he just tell you? Flash a badge, explain the situation. Because men like me don't respond well to badges. And because by that point, his cover was blown anyway. Daniel's people saw me claim you, saw Marcus back down. In their world, that made him look weak, unreliable. I tried to map it in my head. All the moving parts, all the hidden agendas. Marcus playing at being my ex while actually being law enforcement. Daniel watching from somewhere, using me as bait to draw out Vincent. Vincent stepping in without knowing he was derailing a federal case. And me, somehow, at the center of it all, without understanding any of it. So what happens now? Now we have a problem. Vincent turned from the window. Because the FBI wants you to testify again. They think you can identify Daniel's new partners based on the surveillance photos you took last night. My camera, the evidence I'd collected without meaning to, documentation of crimes I barely understood, and if I refuse, then they'll subpoena you, compel your testimony, possibly charge you as an accessory if they're feeling creative. But you said you'd protect me. I did. I will. But protection has limits, Ava. I can keep you safe from Daniel's people. I can keep you hidden from anyone who wants to use you as leverage, but I can't make you invisible to the federal government. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 years trying to disappear, building a life so carefully anonymous that even I sometimes forgot who I used to be. And now the very institutions that had promised to protect me were demanding I step back into the light. There has to be another way. There is. Vincent crossed to where I sat, lowered himself into the chair across from me. Not towering, not intimidating, just present. You cooperate. You testify. You give them what they need to dismantle Daniel's operation permanently, and then you're free. Actually free, not just hiding. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated, and there's a decent chance something goes wrong. But it's honest. No more running. No more fake names. Just you, telling the truth, and the law doing what it's supposed to do. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that institutions designed to protect actually did their job, that truth mattered, that testifying would lead to freedom instead of just new variations of danger. But I'd believed before. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. That's when Agent Chen is scheduled to debrief you formally. And in the meantime, Vincent stood, and for a moment I thought he was leaving. Instead, he moved to sit beside me on the bed, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the solid reality of his presence. In the meantime, we established some rules. Because this, he gestured between us, at the complicated space we occupied, doesn't work if we're lying to each other. You want rules? 3 of them. His voice was serious. but something in his eyes suggested this mattered more than he was letting on. 1. While you're here, you tell me where you go. Not because I'm controlling you, but because I need to know how to keep you safe. That's reasonable, I admitted. 2. You don't contact anyone from your past without clearing it with me first. Daniel's people are sophisticated. They monitor communications. One phone call to an old friend could reveal your location. Also reasonable. 3. You trust that every decision I make is to keep you breathing, even when you don't understand it, even when it looks like something else. That one was harder. Trust wasn't something I gave easily anymore, and Vincent was asking for it wholesale. And what do I get? I asked. What are my rules? He looked genuinely surprised, like the idea that I might have conditions hadn't occurred to him. Name them. You don't lie to me, even when you think the truth will hurt. Even when it's easier to keep me in the dark. I've spent 3 years living in half-truths and careful omissions. I'm done with that. Done. What else? You let me make my own choices. You can advise, you can argue, you can tell me I'm being stupid. But ultimately, my life is mine. I decide. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Agreed. And the third? I hadn't planned on a third, but sitting there beside him, surrounded by evidence of all the ways people had manipulated and used and lied to me, I knew what I needed. You tell me who you really are. Not the public version, not the dangerous man everyone whispers about. The real Vincent. The one who reads Chopin and keeps photos on his refrigerator and knows how to dance like he actually means it. The silence stretched between us. Outside, morning birds were starting their territorial songs. Inside, Vincent Castellano studied me like I was a problem he couldn't quite solve. Deal, he said finally. But that works both ways. I get to know the real Ava too. Not the invisible photographer. Not the woman who changed her name and learned to disappear. The person you were before Daniel taught you that being seen was dangerous. I don't know if she still exists. Then we'll find out together. He extended his hand. Formal, almost old-fashioned. A contract sealed with skin instead of signatures. I took it, and his fingers closed around mine with the same certainty I remembered from the dance floor. But this felt different. Less like claiming, more like choosing. So what happens now? I asked. Now I order breakfast. We eat like civilized people, and you tell me everything. Every detail about Daniel you remember. Every interaction with Marcus. Every threat. Every fear. Every moment that made you change your name and run. That's going to take a while. I have time. We talked for hours. Started in my room, moved to the breakfast room when Thomas brought food neither of us really ate. Ended up in Vincent's study as afternoon light slanted through windows that overlooked gardens where people had photographed me just hours ago. He asked questions that hurt to answer. I gave him details I'd tried to forget. We built a timeline of my relationship with Daniel. The whirlwind romance, the gradual isolation, the moment I'd found documents I wasn't supposed to see and understood that the man I loved was involved in something that would destroy us both. You could have run then, Vincent said, before you testified, before the FBI got involved. You could have just disappeared. I thought about it. God, I spent weeks thinking about it. But there were other women, younger women, ones he was already targeting. And I couldn't just leave them. So you testified knowing it would make you a target. I testified because it was the right thing to do. And because some stupid part of me believed that doing the right thing would matter, that the system would protect me, but it didn't. They gave me a new identity and a pamphlet about WITSEC and told me to be careful. Then they moved on to the next case. I was alone with a fake name and $3,000 in cash and absolutely no idea how to stop being terrified. Vincent was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost that careful neutrality. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you regret it? Testifying? Every single day. I met his eyes, and I'd do it again. Both things are true. Something in his expression cracked, just slightly, just enough for me to see the person underneath the armor. He crossed to where I sat, lowered himself to eye level like he had before. I need to tell you something. About why I intervened at the gala. The real reason, okay, my sister, Sophia. She was in a relationship with a man who hurt her. Not physically, He was too smart for that. But emotionally, financially, he isolated her the same way Daniel isolated you. By the time she asked for help, it was almost too late. He leaned back, and I saw the cost of the memory in his eyes. I got her out, made sure he couldn't touch her again, but the damage was done. She's been in therapy for 2 years and she still flinches when men raise their voices. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just understand. When I saw Marcus grab your wrist, when I saw that look in your eyes, like you were trying to make yourself smaller, trying to disappear, I didn't think. I just acted. Because I couldn't save Sophia from the beginning of her nightmare. But maybe I could save you from the end of yours. The honesty of it stole my breath, because he wasn't making excuses or justifying his behavior. He was just telling me the truth, messy and complicated and human. So I'm a stand-in for your sister? No. He said it with absolute certainty. Sophia needed saving. You needed someone to see that you'd already saved yourself. There's a difference. I didn't realize I was crying until Vincent reached out, thumb-catching tears I hadn't known were falling. This is going to sound insane, I said, my voice rough. But I think I'm glad Marcus grabbed me that night. Why? Because otherwise I never would have met you. Never would have stopped hiding. Never would have had someone look at me and see past the fear to whoever's underneath it. Ava. I know it's too fast. I know we barely know each other. I know this whole situation is dangerous and complicated and probably a terrible idea. But something about you makes me want to stop running. Makes me want to remember what it feels like to be brave. He was so close I could count the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could see the place where he'd cut himself shaving that morning, could catalog all the small human details that made him real instead of mythological. Can I tell you something that will probably scare you? He asked. Yes. I've spent 10 years building walls. 10 years making sure I didn't feel too much, didn't want too much, didn't need anyone enough that losing them would matter. And then you took my hand on that dance floor, and every single one of those walls started to crack. Vincent, I'm not finished. He moved closer, and my breath caught. You scare me, Ava, because you make me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need, like honesty instead of strategy, like partnership instead of control, like someone who sees the worst parts of me and doesn't look away. I'm looking. I know. That's what terrifies me. The space between us had collapsed to nothing. I could feel his breath on my face, could see my own reflection in his eyes, could sense the moment balanced on a knife's edge between one thing and another. We should establish another rule, I whispered. What's that? If you're going to kiss me, you should probably do it now, before I lose my nerve and remember all the reasons this is a terrible idea. His smile was slow, devastating, absolutely genuine. That's not a rule. That's an invitation. So accept it. He did. His mouth on mine was nothing like I'd expected, not claiming or demanding, but questioning, asking permission with every small movement, every careful touch. I answered by pulling him closer, by opening to him, by letting myself fall into the kiss like it was safety instead of danger. When we finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. We're going to have to testify, he said quietly. Both of us. You about Daniel, me about last night. They'll want to know everything. I know. It's going to be ugly. They'll question every decision, every action. They'll try to make this, he gestured between us, look like manipulation or Stockholm Syndrome or some other pathology they can label and dismiss. Let them try. You're sure? I thought about running, about new identities and anonymous cities and spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Then I thought about Vincent's rules and my own, about choosing courage over comfort, about finally stopping the retreat. I'm sure. But Vincent? Yes. When this is over, when we've testified and Daniel's in prison and the FBI closes their file, I'm leaving this estate. Something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or understanding. I see. I'm leaving, I continued, because I need to know that when I'm with you, it's because I chose you. Not because I was trapped here, not because I was scared, not because you represented safety when everything else was chaos. I need to walk away and come back freely. The hurt transformed into something else. Relief, recognition, maybe love, though it was too early for that word, too soon to name something still learning its own shape. And will you? Come back? Ask me after the trial. After we've both told the truth and lived through the consequences. After I've remembered how to be someone who doesn't need saving. Deal. He kissed me again, softer this time, like he was memorizing the shape of my mouth, the taste of possibility, the feeling of something beginning instead of ending. When he finally pulled away, he stood and extended his hand. That same formal gesture from earlier. Contract renewed. Partners? I took his hand, let him pull me to my feet. Partners. That night, I slept without the chair against my door, slept deeply for the first time in 3 years, knowing that Vincent was down the hall, that guards patrolled the gardens, that for tonight at least, I was as safe as anyone could be in a dangerous world. I woke to sunlight and coffee and Agent Marcus Chen sitting in Vincent's breakfast room like he'd been invited. He looked different without the drunk, jealous ex costume. Professional, contained, apologetic in a way that made me angrier than his lies had. Miss Reeves, I'm sorry for the deception. Are you? I sat across from him, Vincent beside me, Thomas hovering protectively near the door. Because you got to play a role and move on. I got to live with the consequences. I know, and I'm sorry, but we're close to ending this. Daniel's operation, his partners, all of it. We just need your cooperation. Both of you. He laid out the plan. Testimony, protection, prosecution, a timeline that would take months. Promises that sounded like the ones I'd heard before. Safety, justice, closure. But this time, Vincent held my hand under the table. This time, I wasn't alone. I'll testify, I said. But I have conditions. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're not exactly in a position to negotiate. I have photographs, I said calmly. Documentation of Vincent's operations that could complicate your case significantly. I have testimony about corruption I witnessed. I have evidence that could make your neat little prosecution very messy. Are you threatening a federal agent? I'm establishing my position. You want my cooperation? Then you guarantee our safety? Both of us. Real protection. Not just a pamphlet and a fake name. And when this is over, you leave us alone. Completely. Marcus looked at Vincent. You taught her this. She came up with it herself, Vincent said, and I heard the pride in his voice. I'm just here for moral support. The negotiations took hours, but in the end, Marcus agreed. Protection, testimony, freedom. All the things I'd wanted 3 years ago when I'd first walked into an FBI office and tried to do the right thing. This time, I had leverage. This time, I had Vincent. This time, I was done being invisible. As Marcus left with his lawyers and his promises, Vincent turned to me. You realize you just blackmailed a federal agent. I learned from the best. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or concerned. Be both. I'm a complicated woman. He pulled me close, and I let myself rest against him, not hiding, not disappearing, just being held. What happens now? I asked. Now we prepare, we testify, we survive, and after, you leave. You find out who you are when you're not running, and I wait to see if she comes back. She will. Promise? I pulled back far enough to meet his eyes. I promise. But even as I said it, even as Vincent kissed me like he believed it, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. A message that made everything we'd just negotiated suddenly, terrifyingly irrelevant. We have your sister. The real one this time. You testify, she dies. You run, she dies. You have 24 hours to decide which one of you survives this. Attached was a photo. Lily, bound and gagged, holding today's newspaper. I showed Vincent the screen. His expression went cold, calculating, dangerous. They're escalating. What do I do? He took my face in his hands, made me look at him. You trust me. And you let me do what I should have done from the beginning, which is end this permanently. Before I could answer, before I could ask what permanently meant in his world, he was already moving, making calls, mobilizing his network, transforming from the man who'd kissed me gently into something harder and more terrifying. I stood alone in the breakfast room, still holding my phone, and understood that the rules we'd established that morning were about to be tested in ways neither of us had anticipated. Partners, we'd agreed. But partnership in Vincent's world meant blood and choices and consequences I was only beginning to understand. And somewhere out there, my sister was counting on me to make the right one. The photograph of Lily wouldn't stop burning in my mind, her terrified eyes, the rope marks already visible on her wrists, the way she'd tried so hard to look brave and failed. Vincent made 7 phone calls in 3 minutes. Each one was brief, coded, efficient. I watched him transform into someone I barely recognized. Not the man who'd kissed me hours ago, but something colder, more precise, a weapon with a pulse. "We need to talk about Daniel," he said, ending the last call. "Everything. From the beginning. I already told you. You told me the sanitized version. The one you've been telling yourself so you can sleep at night. I need the truth, Ava. The ugly parts you've been trying to forget." I wanted to be angry at his bluntness. Instead, I felt something crack open inside me, the careful seal I'd put on memories too painful to examine. His name was Daniel Rourke, and 5 years ago, I loved him enough to betray my own judgment. We sat in Vincent's study while I excavated my past. Thomas brought coffee, nobody drank. Outside, the afternoon light turned golden, then amber, then the deep blue of early evening. And I talked. I told him about meeting Daniel at a gallery opening, how he'd been charming, intelligent, passionate about art and literature and all the things that made me feel seen. How he'd pursued me with an intensity that felt like devotion, but was actually something closer to acquisition. He moved fast, I said. Within 2 months, I'd given up my apartment, moved into his place in Brooklyn. Within 4, I'd stopped seeing most of my friends. He never explicitly told me to. He was too smart for that. He'd just create conflicts, make plans that conflicted with theirs, express hurt when I chose them over him. Vincent listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. The money came later, cash that appeared and disappeared, wire transfers I wasn't supposed to see. He worked in finance, he said, hedge funds, international investments. I believed him because I wanted to. Because admitting I didn't know what he really did meant admitting I'd let a stranger control my entire life. When did you know? About 6 months in, I found documents in his home office. Accounts and names I didn't recognize. Transactions that didn't make sense. I asked him about it. He told me I was being paranoid, that I didn't understand how finance worked. Then he cried. Actually cried and told me his ex-girlfriend had accused him of terrible things, that he was terrified I'd believe lies about him too. And you believed him? I wanted to. God, I wanted to so badly. I swallowed the doubt, apologized for snooping, promised to trust him, and for a while, things were perfect again. The memory tasted bitter. I could still remember that version of myself, desperate to be loved, willing to ignore every warning sign if it meant not being alone. What changed? I met one of the women. Complete accident, coffee shop. She recognized me from a photo in Daniel's apartment. She was younger than me, barely 20. She asked if I was still with him, and when I said yes, she started crying. Right there in public, just broke down. Vincent's jaw tightened. She told me everything. How Daniel had recruited her to transport money, how he'd made her feel special and chosen, how she'd ended up facing federal charges while he disappeared. She showed me court documents, evidence, text messages that made my skin crawl. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing my future. That's when you went to the FBI. That's when I started collecting evidence. I copied files, photographed documents, recorded conversations. Took me 3 weeks to build a case solid enough that they'd listen. 3 weeks of lying to Daniel's face, sleeping next to him at night, pretending everything was fine while I systematically documented his crimes. That took courage. That took fear. I was terrified he'd catch me, terrified of what he'd do if he found out, but I was more terrified of becoming that girl in the coffee shop, destroyed by a man who'd never loved me, just used me. The confession exhausted me. I'd spent 5 years trying not to think about those weeks, about the weight of living a lie, about the night I'd finally walked into an FBI field office with a folder full of evidence and a heart full of dread. The FBI promised protection, said I'd testify, Daniel would go to prison, and I'd be safe. They gave me a new name, new social security number, enough money to start over. Then the trial kept getting postponed. Daniel fled the country, and I was left in limbo, not safe enough to use my real name, not important enough for actual protection. So you disappeared. I learned to be invisible, took jobs that paid cash, lived in apartments with month-to-month leases, never got close enough to anyone that losing them would hurt. I became the girl behind the camera, always watching, never participating. Vincent stood and crossed to where I sat. He didn't touch me, just lowered himself to eye level the way he had before. And Marcus showed up 6 months ago. Seemed harmless, friendly, persistent, exactly the kind of guy who doesn't take a hint. He'd show up at the coffee shop where I worked, make conversation, act interested in my photography. I thought he was just lonely. Now I know he was building a file. He used your vulnerability. He used my need to be seen. That's worse. I met Vincent's eyes because I knew better. I knew not to trust men who appeared out of nowhere with perfect timing, but I was so tired of being invisible that when someone finally looked at me, I let him. That's not weakness, Ava. That's being human. It almost got me killed, but it didn't. And now we're going to make sure it never does. He pulled out his phone, showed me a map with 3 locations marked in red. Daniel's in the city. My people tracked the photo's metadata. He's holding Lily in a warehouse in Red Hook, same location where he held his meetings 5 years ago. He's sentimental. That makes him predictable. So we call the FBI. Tell Agent Chen. Chen will follow protocol. Warrants, negotiation, tactical teams. That takes hours we don't have. By the time they mobilize, Daniel will have moved Lily or worse. So what do? Vincent's expression went cold, calculating. We go get her. Tonight, before Daniel realizes we know where she is? That's insane. That's necessary. I looked at the map, at the red pin marking my sister's location, and felt something shift inside me. The old Ava would have waited for authorities, trusted systems, believed in protocol. But the old Ava had spent 5 years running. This Ava was done hiding. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You stay here where it's safe. She's my sister. My responsibility. I brought this to your door, and I'm not going to sit in your estate while you risk your life to fix my mistakes. Ava. Partners. Remember? That's what we agreed. So either we do this together, or I go alone. The silence stretched between us. Outside, shadows lengthened across the gardens. Inside, Vincent studied me like he was seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me, past the fear and the trauma to whoever I was becoming. You'll do exactly what I say. No improvisation, no heroics. You stay behind me at all times. Agreed? And if something goes wrong, you run. You don't look back. You don't try to save me. You just run and let Thomas get you somewhere safe. I'm not leaving you. Ava. I'm not leaving you, I repeated, so don't ask me to promise something we both know I won't do. Something flickered in his eyes. Exasperation, admiration, maybe the beginning of love, though neither of us was ready to name it yet. You're going to get us both killed, or we're going to save my sister and end this. Either way, we do it together. He pulled me close, kissed me hard enough that I tasted desperation beneath the desire. When this is over, he said against my mouth, we're having a serious discussion about your definition of partnership. Looking forward to it. Thomas appeared in the doorway with tactical gear I didn't know how to wear and expressions I didn't know how to read. Vincent helped me into a vest, checked the fit with hands that shook slightly. Last chance to stay here, he said quietly. Not taking it? Didn't think so. We left as darkness fell. 3 vehicles moving through the city like sharks through water. Silent, purposeful, lethal. I sat beside Vincent, my camera around my neck because documentation was the only weapon I knew how to use, and watched the city blur past. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The same one that had sent Lily's photo. The message was simple. TikTok, Ava, time's running out. Choose wisely, testify, and lose her. Or disappear, and maybe she lives. You have until midnight. I showed Vincent. He typed something on his own phone, then took mine and threw it out the window. What are you? They're tracking you. Every message, every call. As long as you have that phone, they know where you are. But what if they try to contact me? What if they have instructions? They're not going to contact you, Ava. They're going to kill Lily regardless of what you do. That's how people like Daniel operate. Eliminate leverage, eliminate witnesses, eliminate anyone who can testify. The words hit like bullets. Then we're too late. We're not too late. Because Daniel's expecting you to negotiate, to beg, to wait for his instructions. He's not expecting us to come for her. That gives us an advantage. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark, industrial, exactly the kind of place where bad things happen to people nobody would miss. Vincent's team moved into position. I followed him through shadows that felt alive with threat. And somewhere inside, my sister was waiting for me to save her, or fail her, or prove that courage was just another word for the choices we made when everything else had been taken away. Vincent squeezed my hand once. Hard, quick, a promise without words. Then we went to war. The warehouse smelled like rust and river water and something darker I didn't want to name. Vincent moved through the darkness like he'd memorized the blueprint, each step deliberate, each breath controlled. I followed, my heart hammering so loud I was certain everyone could hear it. His team had split off, surrounding the building in a pattern that suggested they'd done this before. Often, we found the first guard smoking by a side entrance, bored and distracted. Vincent's hand moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment the guard was standing, the next he was unconscious on the ground. No gunshot, no struggle, just efficient violence that made my stomach turn. "Stay close," Vincent whispered. Inside, the warehouse opened into vast emptiness punctuated by metal beams and shadows. Somewhere above us, fluorescent lights flickered, creating pools of sickly illumination. And there, in the center of it all, was Lily. She was tied to a chair exactly like in the photo, but worse somehow, more real, more fragile. Her head hung forward, hair covering her face. I couldn't tell if she was conscious, couldn't tell if we were already too late. I moved without thinking. Vincent's hand shot out, caught my arm. "Wait, it's too easy. That's my sister, which is exactly why it's a trap. Look." He pointed to the rafters. I squinted, saw movement, shapes that resolved into men with rifles. At least 4, maybe more. Positioned for ambush, waiting for someone stupid enough to rush in. "They knew we'd come," Vincent said quietly. "They're using her as bait. So what do? We spring the trap. But on our terms?" He spoke into his radio. Low, coded phrases I didn't understand. Around us, the warehouse suddenly came alive. Vincent's team moved from the shadows, not toward Lily, but toward the rafters. I heard surprised shouts, then gunfire that made my ears ring. Vincent pulled me behind a concrete pillar, his body covering mine as bullets pinged off metal beams. The fluorescent lights exploded one by one, plunging us into near darkness broken only by muzzle flashes. "When I move, you go straight to your sister. Cut her loose and get to the east exit. Don't wait for me, don't look back. Thomas will be waiting." "Vincent, I can't." "You can. You will." He gripped my shoulders, made me look at him. "This is what protection looks like in my world, Ava. It's not pretty. It's not clean. But it keeps the people I care about breathing." Then he was gone, moving into the chaos with a gun I hadn't seen him draw. I watched him advance on the rafters with cold precision, watched his team coordinate like a single organism, watched violence unfold with choreographed efficiency, and I ran for Lily. She lifted her head when I reached her, eyes wide with terror that transformed into recognition. "Ava! Oh God! Ava! You shouldn't be here! Shut up and hold still." My hands shook as I worked at her bindings. They'd used zip ties, industrial strength, designed not to break. I fumbled for the knife Vincent had given me, small, sharp, terrifying in my unpracticed grip. "He said you'd come," Lily whispered. "Daniel, he said you couldn't help yourself, that you'd always choose me over your own safety. He's been planning this for months, Ava. He knew about Vincent, knew you'd fall for someone who'd try to save you. It's all been a setup. I know." Almost got it. The zip tie snapped. Lily's hands came free, and I moved to her ankles. Around us, the gunfire had stopped. The silence felt worse somehow, pregnant with threat. "Where is he?" I asked. "Where's Daniel?" "I don't know. He was here earlier, but then he left. Said he had one more piece to put in place." The knife slipped. I cursed. Tried again. The second zip tie broke, and Lily stumbled to her feet. legs weak from hours of restraint. Can you walk? I think so. Ava, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. Should have listened when you said, "We'll discuss your terrible judgment later. Right now, we run." I grabbed her hand, started toward the exit Vincent had indicated. That's when I saw him. Daniel stepped from the shadows like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. He looked different than I remembered. Thinner, harder, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much and lost the capacity for empathy. He held a gun casually, like it was an extension of his hand. Ava, God, you look good. Different, but good. The hair suits you. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Let us go, Daniel. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Have I? Because from where I'm standing, you still don't understand. He moved closer, and I pulled Lily behind me. You think this is about revenge? About punishing you for testifying? This was never about you, sweetheart. You were just convenient. I don't understand. Vincent Castellano. He gestured to where Vincent stood frozen across the warehouse, gun raised but unable to shoot without risking hitting us. 3 years I've been building a case against him. 3 years of evidence, testimony, witnesses. And then you appeared? Perfect, damaged, exactly his type. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist playing hero. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. You've been working with the FBI, not against them. Give the girl a prize. Marcus was my partner, yes, but I was the one who recruited him. I was the one who suggested using you as bait. Because men like Vincent, they're untouchable until they care about someone, until they have a weakness we can exploit. You used me to get to him. I used you to destroy him, and it worked beautifully. Every action he took to protect you, every threat he neutralized, every law he broke, all documented, all admissible, all pointing to a pattern of criminal behavior that will put him away for life. Vincent's voice cut across the warehouse, cold and absolute. Rourke, whatever deal you made with the feds, it's void now. You kidnapped a civilian, endangered federal operations. They'll burn you to protect their case. Maybe. Daniel's smile was terrible. But I'll take you with me, and honestly, that's enough. He raised the gun, not at me, at Vincent. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. I moved without thinking, throwing myself in front of Lily. Vincent shouted something I didn't hear. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot was deafening, but I wasn't hit. He fell, blood blooming across his chest, gun clattering to the concrete. Behind him, Agent Marcus Chen lowered his weapon, face grim. Federal agent, nobody move. The warehouse flooded with light. FBI tactical teams poured in from every entrance, weapons raised, voices shouting commands. Vincent's team dropped their guns, raised their hands. Vincent himself stood perfectly still, eyes locked on mine. Marcus crossed to Daniel, checked his pulse, shook his head. Then he looked at me. Ms. Reeves, Mr. Castellano, you're both under arrest. For what? Vincent's voice was dangerously quiet. Saving her sister from your rogue agent. Rogue agent? Marcus almost laughed. Daniel Rourke has been deep undercover for 3 years. Everything he did was authorized, documented, designed to build a case against you, and you walked right into it. That's not possible, I said. The FBI told me Daniel was wanted, that he'd fled. The FBI told you what we needed you to believe, to make you vulnerable enough that men like Castellano would intervene, to create the exact scenario we just witnessed. The words hit like physical blows. Because if Marcus was telling the truth, if Daniel had been federal all along, then everything, the threats, the protection, the careful construction of trust between Vincent and me, had been orchestrated. We'd been puppets, dancing to strings we couldn't see. Vincent's expression went blank. Not angry, not defeated, just empty in a way that scared me more than his violence had. You used her, he said quietly. Traumatized her, made her run, destroyed her life, all to get to me. We did what was necessary. Marcus signaled his team. Mr. Castellano, you're under arrest for kidnapping, racketeering, witness tampering, and about 15 other charges we've documented over the past week. Ms. Reeves, you're being detained as a material witness. She didn't know, Vincent said, his voice sharp. Whatever you think I've done, she wasn't involved. She's innocent. Is she? Because our surveillance suggests otherwise. The photographs she took of your operations, the evidence she collected, that makes her an accomplice. My camera. The documentation I'd thought was insurance had become evidence against both of us. They separated us, put Vincent in handcuffs, read him rights he probably had memorized, led him toward a waiting vehicle while he stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Regret, maybe, or apology for dragging me into his world. Marcus approached me, his face professionally sympathetic. I know this is hard, but you'll be protected. Real protection this time, not just promises. By the same people who used me as bait, who let me believe I was safe when you were just positioning me for sacrifice. We do what's necessary to take down dangerous men. And what about the women you destroy in the process? Do we matter at all? Or are we just collateral damage in your righteous crusade? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. His silence told me everything. They led me out of the warehouse into a night that felt different, colder, emptier, full of promises that had turned to lies. Lily was already in an ambulance, being checked for injuries. Vincent was gone, disappeared into federal custody, and a system that would grind him down without mercy. And I stood there, cameras flashing, agents shouting questions, and understood with terrible clarity that I'd been fighting the wrong war. The real enemy hadn't been Daniel or Vincent or the past I'd tried to outrun. It had been the people who'd promised to protect me while using me as ammunition. My phone, a new one, provided by Thomas before we'd left, buzzed in my pocket. One message, from Vincent's lawyer. Evidence is inadmissible. Fruit of the poisonous tree. He'll be out in 48 hours. The question is, will you still be there when he is? I looked at the message until the words blurred, and realized I had one more choice to make. The most important one. Vincent was released in 46 hours, not 48. I know because I counted every single one of them, sitting in a FBI safe house that felt more like a cell, watching agents come and go with files that documented my entire life. They asked questions I'd already answered, showed me evidence I'd already seen, tried to convince me that Vincent Castellano was dangerous, manipulative, exactly the kind of man who destroyed women like me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'd been fooled by good bone structure and a protective instinct that felt like love, but was really just another form of control. Or maybe they were terrified that I'd seen through their righteous justifications to the ugly truth underneath, that they'd weaponized my trauma, turned my survival into their ammunition, and called it justice. I didn't tell them about the lawyer's message, didn't mention that Vincent had people on the outside coordinating his defense. I just sat in their safe house and made a decision that would either save me or destroy me. I was done being their weapon. Agent Marcus Chen appeared on the morning of the third day with coffee and the kind of concerned expression that probably worked on more trusting people. How are you holding up? How do you think? He sat across from me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes, measuring my anger, assessing my usefulness, determining whether I was still an asset or had become a liability. I know you're upset, but you need to understand what we're up against. Vincent Castellano's organization has been operating for over a decade. Money laundering, extortion, trafficking. Trafficking? I cut him off. You have evidence of that. His hesitation told me everything. We're building the case. You're building a narrative. There's a difference. I leaned forward. I've seen what Vincent does. Yes, he breaks laws. Yes, he operates outside the system. But trafficking? Harming innocents? Show me the evidence or stop lying to make your crusade feel righteous. You're defending him. I'm questioning you. There's a difference. Marcus set down his coffee with careful precision. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its sympathetic warmth. Ms. Reeves, you need to decide whose side you're on. We can protect you, give you a real life, let you testify and walk away clean. Or you can align yourself with a criminal and spend the next decade looking over your shoulder. Those aren't the only options. They're the only ones I'm offering. I studied him, this man who'd pretended to be my ex, who'd played jealous and drunk and harmless while documenting my vulnerabilities for his file. He'd been good at it, good enough that I'd almost believed him, almost let him close enough to matter. Did you ever feel guilty? I asked. Even a little. About what? About using my trauma. about making me relive everything Daniel put me through so you could build your case, about turning my survival into your career advancement. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance that I'd named it. We all make sacrifices for the greater good. Except you're not the one sacrificing. I am, and you're calling it protection. I stood before he could respond. Walked to the window overlooking a street I didn't recognize in a city that felt foreign, despite being the place I'd tried to make home. I want to see the evidence. All of it. Everything you have on Vincent. If you want my testimony, I need to know what I'm testifying to. That's not how this works. Then we're done. I turned to face him. Because I'm not sending a man to prison based on your word. Not after you've lied about everything else. The silence stretched between us. Outside, ordinary people lived ordinary lives. Walking dogs, carrying groceries, existing without the weight of impossible choices crushing their lungs. I'll see what I can do, Marcus said finally. You have 24 hours. After that, I'm gone. New city, new name, new life, and you can build your case without me. You can't just leave. Watch me. He left. I stayed at the window, watching the city blur through glass that trapped me more effectively than any lock. My new phone buzzed. Unknown number. But I recognized the cadence of the words before I even read them. The safe house on Meridian, second floor, corner unit. They're watching the front. Use the service entrance. Car will be waiting. Your choice, Ava. Always your choice. V. Vincent. Free, coordinating, giving me an escape route while federal agents tried to convince me he was the villain. I should have reported the message. Should have shown Marcus. Let them trace it. Prove that Vincent was attempting witness tampering or obstruction or whatever legal term they'd use to add years to his potential sentence. Instead, I memorized the message and deleted it. Because I'd made my choice. Not to save Vincent or condemn him. Not to trust the FBI or rebel against them. But to finally, stop letting other people decide who I was and what I was worth. I spent the day planning, watching agent rotations, timing shift changes, mapping exit routes with the same meticulous attention I'd once used to document Daniel's crimes. They thought I was compliant, traumatized, waiting for their permission to exist. They were wrong. At midnight, during a shift change when attention wavered, I moved. Service entrance, exactly like Vincent said. Down 3 flights of stairs, through a basement that smelled like mildew and institutional cleaning supplies, out into an alley where a car idled with its lights off. Thomas behind the wheel. He didn't speak, just nodded and pulled into traffic like we were on a routine errand instead of fleeing federal custody. Where's Vincent? Somewhere safe. He'll explain when we arrive. And where is that? Thomas met my eyes in the rearview mirror. Somewhere you can make an actual choice. Ms. Reeves. Not the illusion of one. We drove for an hour. Out of the city, through suburbs, into countryside that felt impossibly far from the chaos I'd left behind. Eventually, we turned down an unmarked road that led to a house that was somehow both modest and impenetrable. Small structure, reinforced doors, windows that reflected more than they revealed. Vincent waited on the porch. He looked tired, not defeated, just worn down by the machinery of justice grinding against him. When I got out of the car, he didn't move to embrace me, didn't assume I'd come back to him instead of just away from them. Thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet. I climbed the porch steps, maintaining distance between us. I came because I need answers. Real ones, not the sanitized versions either side keeps offering. Ask, did you know? That Daniel was federal. That this was all a setup. That they were using me to build a case against you. Not at first. His honesty cut through the night air. I suspected something was wrong when Marcus appeared too conveniently. But I didn't know the full scope until they arrested me. Until I saw their evidence and realized how long they'd been watching, how carefully they'd positioned you. And you still helped me, even knowing it was a trap. Especially knowing it was a trap. He took a step closer, and I didn't retreat. Because they weren't wrong about one thing. Ava, I do care about you. Enough that it's become a weakness they can exploit. Enough that walking away would probably be smarter for both of us? Is that what you want? For me to walk away? I want you to choose freely. Not because you're running from them or toward me, but because you've decided who you are and what you want. The question I'd been avoiding crystallized in that moment. What I want is to stop being everyone's pawn, yours, theirs, Daniel's, the FBI's. I want to be the person making choices instead of having choices made for me. Then make one. Vincent spread his hands, weaponless and open. They'll offer you safety, a new identity, protection, the chance to testify and walk away clean. It's not a lie. They can give you that life. Anonymous, secure, exactly what you've been trying to build for 3 years. And what can you offer? Truth. Complicated, ugly, dangerous truth. The knowledge that you're choosing someone flawed, someone who breaks laws and makes decisions you might hate, but also someone who sees you, really sees you, not as a victim to save or a witness to use, but as a person strong enough to survive everything that's tried to destroy her. I'd spent 3 years invisible, 3 years making myself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. And here was Vincent Castellano, offering me the opposite: visibility, complication, the terrifying freedom of being fully known. If I stay, what happens? We fight. Together, we expose the FBI's tactics, challenge their case, make them prove every accusation in court. It'll be public, brutal, exhausting. You'll be questioned, doubted, possibly charged as an accomplice. Your life will get worse before it gets better. And if I go, you disappear. New name, new city, new life. In 5 years, you'll have rebuilt everything. In 10, you might even believe you made the right choice. The honesty of it hurt more than lies would have. There's a third option, I said slowly, which is, I testify, but not for them, not to put you away or validate their crusade. I testify to the truth, all of it. What Daniel did, what they did, what you did. I tell my story without letting anyone edit it for their agenda. Vincent's expression shifted. Not quite hope, but something close. They'll destroy you for that. Both sides. The FBI will call you compromised. My enemies will call you a traitor. You'll have no allies, no protection. I'll have the truth. That has to count for something. In a just world, maybe. In this one. His laugh was bitter. Truth is just another weapon, Ava. They'll use it against you. Let them try. I moved closer, until we were standing near enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The lines stress had carved around his mouth. I'm tired of hiding, tired of letting fear decide everything. So here's my choice. I'm going to tell my story, publicly, completely, without anyone's permission. And after that, whoever I am, whatever's left when the truth finishes stripping away all the lies, that person will decide about you, about us, about whether love is something worth fighting for or just another beautiful trap. That's not choosing me. No, it's choosing myself. Finally, something in his expression cracked. Relief or grief or recognition that I was doing exactly what he'd asked for, and it was costing him everything he'd hoped. I can accept that. Can you? I can try. He reached out slowly, giving me time to retreat. Touched my face with a gentleness that contradicted every brutal thing I'd witnessed him do. Because the woman who walks away after telling her truth, that's the woman I want. Not the one I rescued or protected or manipulated into staying. The real one. However she decides, I kissed him. Not because it was smart or safe, not because I'd made my final choice, but because I needed to know what it felt like to choose tenderness in a world that kept demanding I choose survival. When we pulled apart, both breathless, I saw my reflection in his eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, I recognized her. What happens now? He asked. Now I call a press conference. Now I tell my story before anyone can spin it. Now I stop letting other people write my ending. They'll arrest you, charge you with fleeing custody, obstruction. Let them. I'll tell that story too. I stepped back, establishing the distance I needed to think clearly. Every lie they told, every manipulation, every time they used my trauma to build their case. All of it, public record. You'll need a lawyer. I'll need several, and a publicist, and probably therapy. I smiled, and it felt strange, genuine instead of performed. Good thing I'm dating a man with unlimited resources and questionable morals. Dating? His eyebrow raised. Is that what we're calling this? What would you call it? Complicated, dangerous, possibly the best worst decision either of us has made. Sounds about right. Thomas appeared with a laptop, already open to news sites covering Vincent's release and the FBI's ongoing investigation. The comment sections were vicious, people choosing sides without knowing the full story, treating our lives like entertainment. "They're going to crucify us," Thomas said quietly. "They're going to try." I sat down at the laptop, opened a new document, but first, I'm going to tell them everything. And then they can decide who the real villains are. I wrote for 6 hours straight. Wrote about Daniel and Marcus and the FBI's tactics. Wrote about Vincent's violence and his vulnerability, his crimes and his strange code of honor. Wrote about my own complicity, my own choices, my own evolution from victim to survivor to something I didn't have a name for yet. Vincent read over my shoulder sometimes, never commenting, never asking me to soften anything. When I wrote about doubting him, about witnessing his corruption, about not being certain if love was real or just Stockholm Syndrome with better marketing, he just nodded. "Is this true?" he asked when I finished. "All of it? Every word? Then publish it." I hesitated, finger hovering over the send button that would upload my statement to every major news outlet simultaneously. Once I do this, there's no going back, no more hiding, no more careful anonymity. I know. They'll come for both of us. I know. And we might lose, might end up in prison, bankrupt, destroyed. "Ava," he turned my chair to face him, knelt so we were eye level. "I've spent 10 years building walls to protect myself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. And then you walked into my life and demolished every single one. So yes, we might lose. But at least we'll lose honestly." I kissed him once more. Then I pressed send. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, my statement was trending. Within an hour, news vans were trying to find the safe house. Within 3 hours, the FBI issued a statement calling my account fabricated, while Vincent's lawyers issued theirs calling it vindication. And somewhere in the chaos, my phone rang. My old phone, the one I'd thought was gone forever, the number I'd abandoned 3 years ago. Lily's name on the screen. "Hello? Ava." "Oh my God, I just read your statement. Are you okay? Where are you? Do you need—" "I'm okay," I interrupted. "Actually, okay. For the first time in years, the FBI came to my apartment. They're saying you fled custody, that you're with a dangerous criminal, that I need to convince you to turn yourself in. Are you going to?" Silence. Then, "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. Not "are you safe?" Not "are you thinking clearly?" But "are you happy?" "I don't know yet, but I'm free. And that's close enough. Then screw them." Lily's laugh was shaky but genuine. "Screw everyone who thinks they know better than you what you need. Come home when you're ready. I'll be here." We talked for an hour. Really talked, without agents listening or agendas interfering. She told me about her life, her fears, her own complicated relationship with trust. I told her about Vincent, about choosing uncertainty over safety, about finally understanding that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. When I hung up, Vincent was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Your sister sounds strong. She is. Takes after me. Cocky. Honest." I stood, stretched muscles that had been tense for days. "So what happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we face whatever comes. Lawyers, press conferences, probably arrest warrants. Together? Together." He pulled me close, and I let myself rest against him, not hiding, not depending, just existing in this moment before the storm hit. My phone buzzed one more time. "Agent Marcus Chen. You just made a powerful enemy. Hope he's worth it." I showed Vincent. He read it, deleted it, handed back my phone. Am I worth it? I thought about everything I'd survived, everything I'd learned, everything I'd become in the process of being broken and rebuilt. Ask me in a year. After the trials, after the testimony, after we've both proven we can choose each other freely instead of desperately. A year is a long time. Then it's a good thing I'm patient. Outside, dawn broke over countryside that would soon be swarming with federal agents and press and everyone else who wanted a piece of our story. Inside, Vincent and I stood together in borrowed time, knowing that in a few hours, everything would change again. But for now, for this moment, I was exactly where I'd chosen to be. Not saved, not protected, not hidden, just free. And that, finally, was enough. The press conference happened in a courthouse lobby, surrounded by marble that had witnessed a century of justice and its failures. I wore my own clothes, jeans, a simple black shirt, my camera around my neck like armor, no makeup to hide behind, no carefully constructed image. Just me, standing at a podium surrounded by microphones, about to dismantle every careful lie that had been built around my life. Vincent stood in the back of the room. He'd wanted to stand beside me, but I'd asked him to keep his distance, not because I was ashamed, but because this moment needed to be mine alone. For once, I needed to be seen without anyone's shadow falling across me. The room was packed. Reporters, federal agents trying to look inconspicuous, curious bystanders who'd followed my story online. Agent Marcus Chen stood near the exit, his expression unreadable. I cleared my throat. The room went silent. My name is Ava Reeves. 5 years ago, it was something else. 3 years ago, I changed it again. I've spent half a decade trying to disappear, believing that invisibility was the same as safety. I was wrong. My hands shook. I gripped the podium harder. I'm here to tell you about the machinery that uses victims as ammunition, about institutions that claim to protect while weaponizing trauma, about the difference between rescue and choice, between safety and freedom. I told them everything. About Daniel's initial manipulation, the FBI's promises, the years of running, about Marcus's deception, the choreographed intervention at the gala, the way they'd positioned me to draw Vincent into their trap, about Vincent himself, his violence and his strange honor, his crimes and his capacity for tenderness. I didn't soften anything, didn't make myself more sympathetic or Vincent more heroic, just spoke the truth in all its uncomfortable complexity. The FBI will tell you I'm compromised. That Stockholm Syndrome or manipulation or simple stupidity has clouded my judgment. Vincent Castellano's enemies will say I'm complicit in his crimes. Both sides will use my words against me, twist my testimony, try to make me fit whatever narrative serves their purpose. I looked directly at the cameras. Let them. Because I'm done being edited. Done letting other people write my story while I hide in the margins. Whatever happens next, prosecution, jail, public condemnation, I'll face it as myself. Fully visible. Finally, free. The questions came like bullets. I answered what I could, deflected what I couldn't, refused to let them trap me into sound bites. When someone asked if I loved Vincent Castellano, I paused. I don't know yet, but I know I choose him. Right now, today, I choose the complicated truth of who he is over the comfortable fiction of who anyone else wants me to be. That's not love. That's just honesty. But maybe honesty is how love begins. The press conference lasted 90 minutes. When it ended, federal agents approached with warrants I'd been expecting. Obstruction of justice, flight from custody, conspiracy. The charges felt almost quaint after everything else. Miss Reeves, you're under arrest. I know. I extended my hands for the cuffs. But this time, I'm walking in freely. There's a difference. They led me past Vincent. Our eyes met for just a moment, his full of something I couldn't quite name, mine steady with a certainty I'd never felt before. I'll be waiting, he said quietly. I know. The holding cell was cleaner than I'd expected. They processed me efficiently, took my camera, evidence now, not comfort, and left me in a space designed to make people small. But I didn't feel small. I felt expansive, like finally telling the truth had cracked open something inside me that had been compressed for years. My lawyer arrived within hours. Not Vincent's lawyer, mine, paid for with money I didn't have but would somehow manage. She was young, fierce, unimpressed by federal overreach. They're offering a deal. Testify against Castellano, and most charges disappear. You'd do minimal time, probably just probation. And if I refuse, then we go to trial. It'll be ugly, expensive, very public. They'll paint you as his accomplice. Your past will be dissected. Every choice you've made will be questioned. But I'd be telling the truth. Truth is expensive, Miss H. Reeves. So I've learned. I refused their deal, chose the ugly, expensive truth over convenient fiction. My lawyer looked unsurprised. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can I be both? The trial took 6 months. 6 months of testimony and cross-examination, of watching my life become public entertainment, of federal prosecutors trying to prove I was Vincent's co-conspirator while his enemies tried to prove I was his victim. I was neither. I was just a woman who'd chosen complexity over simplicity, who'd decided that being fully known was worth the risk of being fully judged. Vincent was tried separately. His charges were serious: racketeering, corruption, illegal operations that he didn't bother denying. But the trafficking charges, the violence against innocents, all the justifications the FBI had used to legitimize their tactics, those fell apart under scrutiny. He was powerful, yes. Criminal, absolutely. But not the monster they'd needed him to be to excuse using me as bait. We were both convicted of lesser charges. I got 18 months, Vincent got 3 years. Not justice, exactly, but something closer to truth than either of us had expected. The day they sentenced me, Lily sat in the courtroom's front row. When the judge read the verdict, she didn't cry, just nodded, like she'd expected it, like she understood that some prices were worth paying. Prison was exactly as terrible as advertised, but also, strangely, clarifying. Stripped of everything external, I finally figured out who I was when no one was watching, when no one needed me to be anything except myself. I wrote, filled notebooks with observations and reflections and the beginnings of a book about systems that claim to protect while perpetuating harm. I took photography classes, yes, even in prison, and documented faces that society had decided not to see. And I thought about Vincent, about whether what I felt was love or just the complicated aftermath of shared trauma, about whether choosing him again, after time and distance had given me perspective, would be wisdom or just a different kind of running. Lily visited monthly, told me about her life, her therapy, her own journey toward trusting again. She'd started volunteering with domestic violence survivors, helping other women navigate systems that seemed designed to re-victimize. "You inspired me," she said during one visit. "Watching you choose truth even when it cost everything. That's courage I'm still learning. You're already there. Look at the work you're doing. Because you showed me how. You stopped hiding. You stopped making yourself small. You proved that survival isn't the same as living." I served 14 months with good behavior. Vincent still had 18 months remaining. We'd written letters, careful, honest conversations about everything and nothing, building something real in the spaces between sentences. On my release day, Thomas was waiting. Older now, grayer, but with the same patient steadiness. "Miss I. Reeves. Welcome back. It's just Ava now. No more aliases, no more hiding. He asked me to give you this, an envelope. Inside, a key and a note in Vincent's precise handwriting, the brownstone on Madison. It's yours. No strings, no obligations. Whether you wait for me or not, you deserve a place that's actually home. You deserve everything, Ava, including the freedom to choose what that means." I stood on the courthouse steps, holding a key to a future I hadn't planned, and realized I had one more choice to make. I could start over again. New city, new name, new life untangled from Vincent and the FBI and everything that had tried to define me. Or I could go home. Not to hide or to wait, but to build something real in the place I'd run from. To prove that visibility didn't mean vulnerability, that being known didn't mean being controlled. I chose home. The brownstone was beautiful. Sun-filled rooms, space for a dark room, neighborhood that felt alive without being overwhelming. I filled it slowly with secondhand furniture and photographs I'd taken in prison, with books about trauma and systems and the long road to healing. I launched my photography business properly, portraits of women rebuilding their lives, documentation of communities the world preferred not to see. The work was meaningful, difficult, exactly what I needed. And I waited, not passively, not desperately, but with the quiet certainty of someone who'd chosen their own path and could wait to see if someone else's path might intersect with it. Vincent was released on a Tuesday morning, 14 months after I'd walked free. I wasn't at the prison. Didn't stage some dramatic reunion or grand gesture. Just texted him an address. A coffee shop 2 blocks from the brownstone. Neutral territory where we could meet as equals instead of prisoner and visitor, defendant and co-conspirator. He arrived exactly on time. Thinner, quieter, with the look of someone who'd spent time examining themselves and hadn't loved everything they'd found. We sat across from each other, ordered coffee, neither of us drank. "You look good," he said finally. "So do you. Different, but good." Prison has a way of stripping everything down to essentials. Did you find them? The essentials? He considered the question seriously. I found what matters. Family. Sophia's doing well, by the way. She wants to meet you properly. Work that's legal, if slightly boring. Therapy, which I resisted for 6 months before accepting I actually needed it. And the knowledge that the person I was when I met you, the one who thought protection and control were the same thing, needed to evolve or die. Which did you choose? Evolution. Slow, uncomfortable, ongoing. He met my eyes. I'm not the man who danced with you at that gala, Ava. I'm not even sure who I am yet, but I'm trying to become someone worthy of the choice you made. I didn't choose you because you were worthy. I chose you because you were real. And now? Are you still choosing me? I thought about the question. About the months of distance and clarity. The therapy I'd started. The life I'd built that didn't need him to be complete. I think I'm choosing us. Not the desperate version from before, but something newer. Something built on actual foundation instead of crisis and chemistry. That sounds terrifying. It absolutely is. But maybe that's what real love looks like. Not rescue or protection or dramatic declarations. Just two complicated people choosing each other day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Vincent reached across the table, took my hand with a gentleness that felt earned instead of assumed. I can do hard. I've had practice. Me too. We sat there, holding hands across scarred coffee shop table, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness, exactly, but peace. The kind that comes from finally understanding that freedom isn't the absence of connection, it's the presence of choice. My phone buzzed. Lily, asking if I wanted to grab dinner. Life. Continuing. Ordinary and extraordinary. Exactly as complicated as it needed to be. I looked at Vincent. Want to meet my sister? Fair warning, she's protective and slightly terrifying. Sounds perfect. We walked out of the coffee shop into afternoon sun that felt like beginning instead of ending. I thought about the girl who'd hidden behind her camera, who'd changed her name and learned to disappear, who'd believed that being seen was the most dangerous thing she could do. She was gone now, in her place. Someone braver, messier, more fully human. Someone who'd learned that the opposite of trauma isn't safety. It's agency. Someone who'd chosen visibility over invisibility, complexity over simplicity, terrifying honesty over comfortable lies. Someone who was, finally and completely, free.